Hello and welcome back to the Warhammer 3 news. I'm COLONELDAMNEDERS, and as you can see I'm still on holiday, but that doesn't stop me from bringing you another piece of breaking news. Today we have the confirmation of everyone's suspicions that the Ogre Kingdoms are in fact the pre-order race coming with Total War Warhammer 3. We've got a brand new musical trailer, a bunch of screenshots, and possibly the most exciting news of all, an actual release date for Warhammer 3 of the 17th of February 2022, or 105 days from today, or just 15 weeks. So let's waste no more time and dive right in. First of all, that trailer. Of course, it's accompanied by the absolute banger of a war chant talking all about the Ogre's religion of choice, food, and the Great Maw. Now, the Maw was first created when a warpstone comet fell from the skies and plummeted itself deep into the heart of the Ogre Kingdoms. Some say this was caused by Cathayan sorceresses, but there has been no admittance of guilt up until this point. Now, this comet killed off 2/3 of the Ogre population, leaving those that remained extremely angry at those that they thought were responsible. The Ogre homeland was transformed from plains into a desert as the comet destroyed everything near to it. This caused the remaining Ogres to consume anything that they could find. Anything that wandered into their homelands was fair game. They even turned on the weaker members of their own race that were too weak to defend themselves. Now, this way of life extended itself to the Great Maw, which they perceived as a vengeful deity that fell from the heavens to punish them, and to appease it, they must continually feed it a variety of foods. And so as we've seen in the trailer, they have that green pot full of body parts and other things. This is the eternal stew that they're constantly adding to and constantly trying to feed to the Great Maw. Now, we've of course seen them feeding on all sorts in this trailer. We see the various pieces of humans, a couple of unfortunate lizard men, no doubt teasing a minor faction or possible Stein location when we get Mortal Empires 2, and of course that Felbat roasting on the open fire. A shed load of beer, and this regal looking chap wielding a giant leg of meat, that to be that large in his hand must come from a giant horse or some other creature. Speaking of that royal looking dude, I think it's pretty safe to assume that he's one of our legendary lords, most likely Greasus Goldtooth, since he has gold tooths and also looks exactly like him in every other way. He's basically a really fat old rich ogre that says he's too rich to walk, so has his servant Noblars drag him around on a mobile throne, sometimes made from actual living Noblars, but in this trailer and the accompanying imagery, it looks more like a chariot. Now, this of course reminds us all of Gromp the Paunch from Warhammer 2. And there are actually a lot more similarities between these two announcements. It's highly likely we'll see mechanics based around the food and different ingredients that you can collect via travelling all around the map. And obviously there's the visual similarities between Gromp and Greasus because they are two fairly big boys. Now, aside from that, in the trailer we don't actually learn too much aside from getting some generic shots of fairly generic looking ogre units, but the end screen has some extremely exciting news. Yes, it's the moment we've all been waiting for. We've got the release date for Total War Warhammer 3 of the 17th of February 2022. Now, can I just say that I'm now more excited than ever and cannot wait to play it next year. But, CA, if you're listening, don't let this be a Cyberpunk 2077. We'd rather wait for a great game than have to bug test a very mediocre and half-finished game. So take all the time you need, but if you can stick to this release date, I'll be very excited. Now, another thing we see along the bottom are a couple of new platforms the game is now coming to. It's coming to the Microsoft Store, for whoever uses that, and Xbox Game Pass. Now, if you don't know Xbox Game Pass, you pay about £8 or £10 a month, and you can play all of these games that are in their library for free. So the amount of new players that this could possibly bring to Total War Warhammer, the franchise, if more games get added to there, is pretty insane to think about. And of course, all of these platforms are getting the game on day one. So this means if you're hesitant about dipping your toes into Total War Warhammer, then you can pick up this fairly cheap subscription, which you can often get for £1 for your first month, and give the game a try. And this is going to welcome so many new players into the community, and I'm oh so excited about it. Now let's move on to the screenshots, which actually give us a lot more to talk about in terms of new units. First up in this image, we see the lines of ogres about to clash with what looks to be the forces of Khorne. On the ogre side, we have a bunch of the standard infantry units we've seen already, as well as a couple of new units. Of course, the most obvious is the large horned creature. This is most likely a stone horn, which are huge woolly beasts native to the area, with horns made from literal fossils from the mountains where they live. They will be stupidly tough and very hard to stop in combat. The dude with the armoured jawline could possibly be an ogre butcher, which is a type of lord or hero, since he has an apron on, but I can't truly tell. This could also be from the Iron Guts tribe, who tend to wear more armour and metal than most others. There's also a guy that is literally on fire. He's most likely a Firebelly. These are a type of ogre hero that are mages of an ogre deity known as the Firemouth. If this is correct, then it's likely they will use a select number of abilities as spells, rather than having access to a traditional lore. And of course we have the giants at the back. These are probably slave giants. As the name suggests, they are giants that are being kept as slaves by the ogres. Hopefully CA has worked out a way to make giants less useless than they are now, otherwise this could make a very pitiful addition to the roster. Next up, we have another shot of an Ogres versus Khorne fight, and we see a dude in this shot with a hook and blade for hands. I would guess this is our second legendary lord, most likely Scrag the Slaughterer. He's a legendary prophet of the Great Maw, and he drags a meat pot behind him into battle that he constantly fills with enemies he fells. He also has a fairly unique relationship with Gorges from his backstory, which we don't see anywhere here, but I would suspect he'll work closely with them once we learn more about him, and they are most likely going to be added to the roster. We of course get the shots of Greaser's Goldtooth on his mobile throne being backed up by various units. He looks to have some heavily armoured Iron Guts, as well as some Lead Belchers behind him. Lead Belchers are ranged units of the Ogres that carry great cannons into battle for massive damage with almost artillery-like range. We also get a look at a possible battle or campaign map for the Ogres, with bones strewn everywhere and crude structures dotted across the landscape. And finally we see the image that was behind the end screen in more detail. We can see a few Noblars dotted around, which are a race that are subservient to the Ogres, kind of like the Goblins to the Greenskins. These will play a part in battle as support and weak units, as well as no doubt helping out with various other parts of Empire management, like cooking and slaughtering. Now finally we have the blog post announcing all this and much more, so I'll try and go through quickly and pick out the best bits. So of course Warhammer 3 will come out on all platforms that you know and love, like Steam and Epic, but also the Microsoft Store and Xbox Game Pass. It will be playable on Windows with macOS and Linux to follow shortly. The version on Game Pass will be the full game, with any free DLCs getting added to it, but paid DLCs will require separate purchases. So if you think you can just get it on Game Pass and never buy DLC again, I'm afraid I've got some bad news, but nevertheless that is an extremely good deal. Now there are also a couple of special editions for the game. We've got the Limited Edition and the Day 1 Edition. The only difference between the two is that the Limited Edition gets a metal embossed case for the game. Aside from that, both editions come with a world map, some stickers, and of course, the Ogre Kingdoms. Speaking of one of those goodies, the map, this is actually our first look at the map of Total War Warhammer 3 in the campaign. Look at it in all its glory, it looks to be a chunky one, even if you're not counting the 4 realms of chaos on their own plane of existence. Now it's a little hard to see, but we can make out the Cathay lands and the Ogres right next door. Presumably Kislev is under the stickers, but we can also see Nordland and Midlandland and Witcher's Wood. All our areas from the current map, so we may be reuniting with some older factions sooner than we realise. And of course, those 4 planes of chaos look to be actual smaller areas of map rather than just a boss location, so I cannot wait to get lost in each one of them and find out exactly how to traverse from one world to the next. Anyway, back to the blog now. Now we're reassured that no content will be exclusive to any platform. That means when a DLC drops or a new game drops, it will release to every single one of these platforms simultaneously, give or take a few seconds because you know servers. The rule of course will be crossplay, so if you want to play with your friend on Game Pass and you're on Steam, then you will be able to do that, both in campaign and multiplayer battles, so they say. Of course you'll get access to the Ogre Kingdoms if you purchase it in the first 24 hours of the game releasing, or if you pre-order it. Of course reviews will come out before the game itself does come out, so if you want to wait until reviews, especially for the Ogre Kingdoms before deciding to pick it up, then that's totally fine. After those first 24 hours, the Ogre Kingdoms will become a standard DLC similar to the Warriors of Chaos, so you will still be able to get them, but now you have to pay a little bit of money. Now we're of course getting these 6 starting factions with Warhammer 3, so we're getting the 4 Chaos of Khorne, Slaanesh, Nurgle and Tzeentch. We're also of course getting Kislev and Cathay, and then also with the addition of the 7th, we're now getting the Ogre Kingdoms. And if making guides for 3 years for every single faction in the game of Warhammer 2 has taught me anything, it's that can last you an extremely long time. We will obviously be getting a combined map combining the maps of Warhammer 1, Warhammer 2 and Warhammer 3 at some point down the line, but for now that isn't a focus or a priority. They are solely focusing on the Warhammer 3 launch campaign, which will probably be something like the Vortex, so it's a more contained and more story-based campaign, whereas the sandbox will come later, we'll just have to wait for it. Now of course there'll be a Blood for the Blood God DLC, because it wouldn't be a Total War game if it wasn't, and there are of course legal reasons that we have previously spoken about. But if you own the DLC for either Warhammer 1 or Warhammer 2, then you won't have to pay for it for this one, so that's quite nice. And of course Warhammer 3 will mark the end of focused support for Warhammer 2. Of course, if there are any horrific bugs, CA will presumably be fixing those and doing some light bounce patches until the game is in a decent point to leave it. But as for actual focused updates like reworks, future DLCs, of course when Warhammer 3 comes out, that does unfortunately mean that the game will come to an end. Of course we'll still be able to go back and play Mortal Empires until we get Mortal Empires 2 or Immortal Empires in Warhammer 3, but until then we will always have Mortal Empires in our souls. And that just about wraps up everything new that we learn in this Ogre Kingdoms announcement. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything in the trailer or the images, and of course let me know if you're excited, what do you think about all this news, what do you think of the new release date, let me know down in the comments below. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe so that you never miss another piece of news ever again. If you enjoy the show and would like to support it, then consider becoming a member, either here on YouTube, over on Patreon, or on Twitch. Doing so earns you shoutouts like Itchy Boy LC for their support and Down Clean Ones tier. Thank you to all supporters and thank you for watching, but for now, I've been COLONELDAMNEDERS, and I will see you next turn.